Hey, Alyssa, how you doing?
Morning, Kate. Great. How are you?
Good, good. So,
Um,
you ready to
how
have a chat today?
yeah, ready. How excited are you about our first podcast?
Yeah, really excited. I think, talking about startup and scaling secrets for laser clinic owners is going to be really exciting, really help a lot of people because it's so easy to fall into overwhelm in the beginning, right?
Oh, totally. It's really hard to fall out of overwhelm sometimes too, isn't it? And this will be part of a series that we're doing for listeners too, so that we can give them all of those pearls and rubies that we've learned along the way from not only our own businesses, but from dealing with business owners every day and being on the end of the phone all the time to answer the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, 2020 hindsight vision is always so clear, isn't that? But when you're first starting out, that clarity is what's really missing.
It is. And when you're starting out and you're trying to get your head across your whole business, you're juggling so many different elements of it, some of which are familiar to you, and some of that are them are so completely alien. Like never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that I would know what organic SEO is, for example. My background is as a clinician and a nurse practitioner. So sometimes when my team are talking to me about things around websites and social media and stuff, I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry, but I've got no idea what you're talking about. So I feel really excited about this series because, yeah, we're going to give some clarity and probably if you're up for it, Kate, maybe we could share some of the pitfalls we've had in our own businesses along the way.
Yep. Yeah, I think, people it's really good to share some of the mistakes that we've made. It just makes us seem very human, but also it's inspiring for other people to know, someone got over a massive challenge. Like, the day that I thought I had I had lost all of my customers because of something disastrous. Anyway, we can get onto that. One of the big things that I think that we do in the beginning, particularly if we haven't had a business before, is that we compare ourselves to people who are well established in business.
Mhm.
And so that then makes us think that we have to have everything that they have, like this beautiful website and this beautiful social media. And so we then kind of overwhelm ourselves in a way. And we don't realize that really the key to most successful businesses is to really start lean and be agile. Being lean means that you can develop the minimum viable product, get something out really fast, but it also gives you the ability to pivot depending on what your market's telling you. So if you can keep these two kind of ideas, concepts in mind to be lean and to be agile and to know that we're constantly recreating things, we're constantly improving things at the edges, but we just need that minimum viable product to get going. So keeping that in mind, if I was going to start a laser clinic, what do I actually need to have in place in terms of my knowledge and what do I need to know? Do I need registrations? Do I need to be a beauty therapist? Do I need to be a nurse? Like, what do I need to have in place?
So, first of all, I would say that a minimal viable product was a revelation when I heard about it. And one of the things that I often say is when you're starting out in your business, treat it like you're laying down a pathway of pavers and just lay the next paver down before you step on it. Because if you try to get to the end of the path, you're right, Kate, you're going to be overwhelmed. So if you're looking at other people's websites, other people's businesses, that's all very well, but they're what you're aiming for at the end. It's not what you're going to be able to achieve in the short term. So you really need to contain it. When I first set up Bravura, I didn't even have a website. All I had was the landing page at the front of my learning management system. I had no SEO, no advertising, nothing. I just had somewhere for the students to go. And I knew that wasn't ideal, but I just had to deliver. And it wasn't even perfect when I delivered. I've tweaked it and changed it through the last 7 years. And I often joke to my business partner that, oh my goodness, all these years down the track, why haven't I still got this all right? Because I seem to be constantly tweaking the business and constantly updating things, and which is great, but it's like, God, there's no end to this. And I guess that's been a really great take home message for me too, is in our businesses, we aren't ever finished. Even when we come to sell, we've still got things to do before we sell.
Yep.
So to get to your question, if we go right back, I think the most important thing for new business owners to do in this laser clinic space is to get themselves educated. So one of the mistakes that I see all the time is that they put the cart before the horse. They find a premise they want to buy, or they've got a hairdresser friend who's got a spare room, or the kids are at school and they've got a garage that's free. And they start to go down that path way before they understand the fundamentals of how the business, the clinical part of the business works, particularly. So I generally say do some education, do things like our beginner's course, which is the laser safety certificate. Not only does that help you to understand the technology, but it also enables you to get registration and licensing in a couple of the states and territories. And I'll come back to that. But it saves you absolutely thousands and thousands of dollars and hours of time to just do some basic courses with us.
Yep. You know what? I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, because one of the things that also does, is intangibles, is that it gives you confidence. It gives you the confidence to know that you're not going to end up on a current affair or something for having burned someone. And you're going to be able to know how to look after your customers. When you have confidence that you know what you are doing, that is invaluable.
Yep. And look, where the most value in that as well is when you come to have those conversations with salespeople are salespeople for a reason. They sell stuff. So they don't often drill right down into clinical risk or the things that we really need to know about taking care of our customers. So you'll be able to make really smart decisions and ask really clever questions when you're going out to start negotiating things like your equipment, your cosmetics, cosmeceuticals, your consumables, what mix of staff you're going to need, for example. So the two key courses would be the beginner's course, which is your laser safety certificate, and we have an advanced course. Now, that advanced course then starts to drill down into the things that you would do every day in a laser clinic. It starts from the most simple concepts and builds to the most complex. So what you're able to do is understand the treatments that you'll be giving as well. So things like hair reduction, tattoo removal, resurfacing and rejuvenation of skin, vascular conditions, pigmentation. So if you've got that fundamental understanding of what not only what you want to do, but what might be possible in the future as well, that is a great way to start. So we also have some collaborations with doctors and nurses, colleges across Australia, and actually into Asia now as well. And those two courses are what they set their professionals up with before they send them out to put their hands on a laser. So
Right.
from a perspective, those would be, your education would be number one, how to get started.
So if I'm going to enroll in one of those courses, do I need to be a beauty therapist? Do I need to be a nurse? Like, do I need something before that? Or can I just, as someone who hasn't worked in this space, can I rock up and enroll in one of those? Do I need anything beforehand?
That is such a good question, Kate. And we know that there's a lot of misinformation being put out into the community about you having to have at least a beauty therapy diploma. That's untrue. So that's untrue. All of our courses are accessible to anybody that has an interest. The only exception to that is that if you're planning to work in Western Australia and you're wanting to do tattoo removal, only doctors or nurses can do it over there.
Okay.
So there's a few nuances with some of the states and territories with regard to that. So this is probably a good time to have a bit of a chat about licensing.
Yeah.
So in most of the states and territories, there's no licensing. However, all of us in Australia and New Zealand are governed by the national standards. So we have the laser and intense light source standards. They're called 4173/2018. Very boring, but I practically know them back to back. The first part of the standards is the safety and the how to protect the public and protect yourself from using non-ionizing radiation. So that is the first place to start, is we need to meet the standards. Now, our beginner's course is fundamentally based on the Australian New Zealand standards, And we're just currently in the process of freshening those up, and they will also meet the international standards. So there's standards that govern us. Now, how I describe standards is it's like if you're building a house. So if you build a house and the builder doesn't use the correct glass in your shower recess and it smashes and someone gets cut in the bathroom, they haven't followed the building standards. It's exactly the same for using these devices. The standards are there for a reason. They're the framework, they're the recipe for us to be able to deliver safe and effective outcomes for our customers. So they're exactly the same. So the same as you would expect your builder to stick to a building code, that's exactly the expectation in the community of people working in a laser clinic. Then if we go from that high level standards and drill down slightly into states and territories, and we'll just concentrate on Australia, there are 3 states and territories that have regulations and licensing associated with using lasers. They are Queensland, Western Australia and Tasmania. Tasmania is the only jurisdiction that also has licensing for intense pulse light systems. Essentially, Tasmania is happy as long as you have had some education in laser safety, so our beginners course, for example, and some clinical experience from the people who supply your machine and some mentoring, you're good to go in Tasmania. So of all the licensing, that's probably the most straightforward. Queensland and Western Australia are a little bit more complex. I think perhaps we might do a session just on those 2 at some stage in the future, Kate, because they have trainee licenses, user licenses. There's a requirement for mentorship and supervision, a logbook, competency statement. And there is also things for implementing a laser into your workplace. So, for example, in Queensland, you need to get a possession license first, which basically asks you how are you going to manage the risks of the non-ionising radiation. So you have to put in quite a complex plan, which we can actually help you with as well. But it also asks things like ask for a license like an acquisition license. So you essentially ask, do your possession license? And they say, yep, you're a fit and proper person. Now you can buy your laser. Then you buy your laser. And then there's steps after that. You have to have your laser signed off by an engineer. You have to have your room evaluated and signed off as well. We can help you with all of that. Quite complex, though, working through that. Western Australia is very similar. Yeah.
So even if you're in a state like New South Wales that doesn't have those sort of state requirements, it's still, like you say, it's a bit like a builder. So if I engage a handyman who's not a qualified builder and I want them to create some sort of structure or do some sort of work, then I'm still expecting them to adhere to the standards, the building standards.
That's exactly right. And if you weren't happy with your building and your construction and you took them to court because somebody got injured, the expectation from the legal system would be that they had adhered to the standards, and it's no difference for laser. If you go in front of a jury or a courtroom and you are able to say that, hold your hand on your heart and say that you stuck to the standards, you'll be held in much higher regard with regard to negligence than you would be if you were oblivious to that. So it's a way of protecting yourself. And it's also, it simplifies what we do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. The standards have been written for you. So it's like the handbook for driving. Just follow the rules.
Sure. So, and you mentioned going in front of the courts. So it's probably a good idea to, at this point, talk about ways that we can protect ourselves. And of course, we're not able to give insurance or, business advice in that sense. But there are things that we need to know about in terms of, insurance and to consider. So, I mean, clearly I can go to and talk to a broker, but there are some things that we need to talk about in terms of what insurance we might want to investigate and whether our insurance might require us to have some training in order to cover us. Is that?
That's correct. So most insurance organisations will ask you for at least for your laser safety certificate. They'll also ask you for your qualifications. Occasionally they'll ask you for your standard operating policies and procedures as well. But definitely as a minimum standard, they want you to have a laser safety certificate because then they understand that you know how to stick to the standards. So you're already, in their eyes, started to reduce the risk. So the higher risk you are, the higher your premium is. So the more you can demonstrate to your insurer that you're a lower risk, the more likely they are to take you on and the less costly your premiums are going to be.
Mm, so, as I said earlier, we probably also need to discuss the types of different insurance. So, obviously, that's going to be down to the person and the premises and that sort of thing. And we would recommend talking to a broker or talking to someone who is an insurance specialist. But there is things like professional indemnity insurance to cover you professionally. And then there's different types of insurance for your premises, should you need that, as well as insurance for your equipment, which, given the investment in laser equipment, I imagine most people would want to have their equipment insured as well. So to make sure that you're adhering to the requirements of your insurance, to make sure that what you're paying there is covering you, is pretty
Covering you. And look, there's a number of insurers. I particularly like Sparrow Insurance. With full disclosure, that's who we insure with, because you want an insurer that absolutely understands the business. And so one of the things that I like that happens is every single item that we're involved in is itemized on the insurance policy. So it's not like a broad brush, it's very specific. So I know exactly what I'm insured for. So talk to somebody that understands the cosmetic industry or the beauty industry, because not all insurers do. And the other thing that's really important to remember with regard, you talked about expensive machinery. So I'll come back to that. Common types of insurance, as you said, would be your professional indemnity. There would be public liability would be the other one, but you're right, your premises and your machinery. Now, with your machinery, your machines need to be serviced at least annually. If you're not having your machine serviced according to the manufacturer's direction and something happens with your machine, your insurer won't cover you. So this sort of thing, these technicalities are really important. The other thing to investigate with your insurer is what happens if my machine goes down, my supplier can't either fix it or replace it in a hurry. If we're in the lead up to Christmas and you're booked back to back for all of November and December and your machine goes down, how are you going to get a replacement in a hurry? So you're not losing money in your business, but most importantly, not letting your customers down.
So there's obviously a lot of different types of insurance. And as we said, people should talk to a professional about this. But just from a sort of starting point, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you have, so professional indemnity is more about the services or advice that you're offering people. So people could take action against you legally. And so that sort of insurance usually covers you for your professional insurance. And then your public liability is usually your premises. So people walk in and they trip over or they fall or something and they have an injury. So that covers that. And then you've got other insurance for your equipment and premises and that kind of thing. So those are all sorts of areas that's worth talking to your insurance broker or an insurance professional about.
Absolutely. And you know what? The most common thing I see in clinics is flood, whether it's from storms or from plumbing. I've said countless times in the last 7 years, it seems to be the most common disaster is flooding.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So making sure that that's in your insurance, even though you might think you're not in a flood area, they can happen for all sorts of reasons. So, even if it's actually
a common one I see. Yeah.
So, we're talking about, let's face it, the boring stuff in the business, like insurance. I mean, I find this the boring stuff. I know lots of people find it really exciting. Insurance brokers do. The other side of things is the business registration. Like when you're starting a business, and again, it can be very useful to go and talk to an accountant or talk to a lawyer about the best sort of business registration for you. We're not qualified to give you advice on the best structure. What I would say is that going back to being lean and being agile, my understanding is that we can start as a sole trader and we can start a company. Obviously, we can also start a trust and all of those things. And again, talk to someone who knows this stuff, your accountant and or a lawyer or whatever. But we can always build up. And that's the thing. If we think about starting the minimum viable product, depending on our vision, we may well say, well, I'm going to start as a sole trader because that's the easiest and simplest way to go. And I can always become a company or create a trust or something later on down the track. So have a look. Often there's business websites. The government, I have to say, the government has come a long way with their websites, and most countries have a government website. You can just Google, how do I start a business? And you'll see a .gov.au or New Zealand website or wherever country you are. And that way you know that the site is credible because it's a government site. And they're much better at interacting with the public than they ever used to be, in terms of laying stuff out in a fairly straightforward manner and saying, this is what it means to be a sole trader. This is what it means to do this and consider these things. So I would say, get some advice, find an accountant, get a lawyer that you trust, that you can talk to about the pros and cons and work out what's the best for your situation. What would you say?
Oh, look, I would agree with you totally. One of the things I would say to those of us starting out is make sure you protect your personal assets. So if something goes wrong, your clientele can't take your house. So I think really important that you protect your personal assets and your family first and foremost, whatever that structure looks like for you. Also with business names, look, this is a really interesting one. With business names, we originally started off as Laser Safety Australia because all we were going to do was laser safety courses.
Yeah.
But two things happened in that space. So one thing was there was 100 different courses and organisations that had laser safety in their name. But it also became very clear at a point that we were going to be way beyond just laser safety courses, that our business was potentially much bigger than that. So I had to rebrand and rethink the business. So I engaged a brilliant marketing person. One thing I'm not afraid to do is pay good people good money to get outcomes. Where I've wasted money, I've tried to save money and cut corners and not got the right person because they might be cheaper. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my business. So please don't be afraid to pay for really good advice, whether it's your lawyer, your accountant, your branding manager, your social media, because you get what you pay for. And
It's so true. It's so true. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And if people think about what they're doing when in the beginning, when they're going for cut price, they're buying from a budget perspective. And a lot of the time they will plan when they get further down the track to get more expensive advice that is better. So when you're starting out in the beginning, getting the legal, insurance, branding advice. And the other thing that I really like about your first name, Laser Safety Australia, this is the big thing when it comes to talking about naming a business. A lot of us get really fancy. And so we can get really fancy. But the thing is, when you're starting out, one of the best things you can do is to have something that people understand from the word go, that doesn't have to be explained. Because if you have to say, so for example, big mistake I made when I first started a coaching business, I thought I'll call it Change My Lane. Have you got any idea what Change My Lane coaching would do? No.
Driving school?
It was all about changing careers. And so it was too fancy. It should have been something around career change or career change coaching or something like that. Because when you have a name, like I now have Sane Social Media, and people can tell from that name, oh, it's about social media.
And it keeps fine.
Laser Safety Australia, we know it's to do with laser safety. We might not understand whether it's what type of laser it is, but we know it's about laser safety. So
That's what it does.
Remember that you can always change stuff later on, but B, in the beginning, all of these little 1%ers, like calling it what it does, having a name that does what it says on the tin is one of the best things you can do. My brother's got a business, and look, it is pretty fancy. It's called This Is Not a Drill. Now, no one really knows when I tell you it's a handyman service, it seems it's great. But you do need to understand that it's a handyman service. This is not a drill.
Yeah. And look, until you've really established your reputation, you can't swap over to something ephemeral like that. So Nike, Google, you can name a million brands that they don't really say what they do necessarily, but that's the luxury of an established brand.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why you can't move into that at some stage. So I would say to the listeners out there, when it comes to your logo and your branding, that's where you're probably, unless you're absolutely 1,000% sure that that's who you're going to be into the future, that would be one of the things that I would do at not a discount price.
That's some great hacks for people that we'll share another episode on how to really, really lean with that stuff.
Yep.
Because, when in the beginning, when you're not 100% sure what your brand is and what it's going to look like, you can certainly do the best and simplest and leanest way of doing that. So just to finish off this sort of episode on what we do in the very beginning when we're starting our business, the one thing that we haven't talked about is a business plan.
Yeah.
And so writing a business plan, this can be another big thing that can seem like a big lot of overwhelm.
Oh God, Kate, I hate writing business plans. I've started probably 5 of them and I've never finished. But what you did say about the government is I think they've got a tool that's like a business plan on a page.
Yeah. So again, the government websites, they have a couple of different business plans that if you can get a template, that makes this stuff a lot easier, right? Now, it also depends, I think, on what you need a business plan for. Do you need it just in your own head to work out where you're going? In which case, you can just put some goals on things. If you need it for getting a loan for your equipment or premises or something, and obviously we'll cover different sort of business models a bit later on. But if you need it, then what I have noticed is that a number of the banks have their own business templates. So if you're with a bank and you're considering going and getting a loan to get your business going, have a look at their website and see if they've got a business plan, because it probably makes more sense to go, you know what, if I'm with this bank, let's take their business plan and fill their template and fill that in, because they're giving you a structure, and then chances are you're more likely to meet their requirements because you've filled in their structure.
I totally agree. It's like writing your homework to suit your teacher, isn't it?
Yep, it really is. It really is. So if you're starting out, the things that we recommend is making sure that you know what training you have in place or requirements you have to meet the standards, because we do have standards in Australia. Making sure that you investigate with professionals your insurance and your business registration, insurance, what is the best setup for you. Talk to a trusted accountant or lawyer about what is the best for you at this stage and whether that might change. And then look at whether you need a business plan to get a loan or just to keep you clear in your own head about where you're going.
I agree. Look, I think probably those are your top 3. I think if I was to add a 4th element, it would be to find a mentor. Whether it's a business, clinical mentor combined, or they're 2 separate people, is find smart brains to tap into that are going to help your journey.
Yeah.
That will make a world of difference to you.
Sure. Yeah. And in fact, I mean, that's why we started Bravura Beauties, isn't it? Because we know the value of hanging out with people who are on the same journey as you. And I have to say, one of the best things that I have done for my business and the things that have got me the biggest growth is hanging out with other established business owners, whether that's in networking or whether that's having, creating a group of people who are agency owners to come together once a month. So Bravura Beauties does this as well. So the knowledge that you can gain from just spending time with people who are in your own space and on a similar journey, no matter how far ahead or behind they are with you, something happens by osmosis. You just kind of learn, you adopt this mindset that just gives you a whole different approach to your business. And that can be invaluable. That can just skyrocket your business faster than a lot of business education courses can.
Oh, I totally agree. And the thing that I absolutely love about Bravura Beauties is they're from all over Australia. So we get unique perspectives. But what we also are able to do is no one's in a competing space in their own suburb or their own city. So the level of sharing is really high, because this can be quite a cutthroat industry. It's highly competitive. There's the opportunity to make great money and make a big difference. So, one of the things that I love is that it's just such a safe space and everyone is willing to share because there's no competition.
Yep. It's an awesome community. And that is actually one of the things that hanging out with a great community, it just makes such a massive difference. It really does.
And So, Kate, on that Bravura Beauties, we've had an insurance agent come and speak. We're coming to speak to us.
Mhm.
So we've got that uploaded into our education portal. But for people who are listening that are keen to look more into the Bravura Beauties, what do you suggest they do?
What I'm going to do is put the show notes underneath this. So I'm going to link to all of the resources that we mentioned here. So there will be links to Sparrow Insurance, if they'd like to investigate that. There'll be links to some of the Australian government websites that are useful for them to be a starting point for looking at some of those things. There'll be a link to Bravura Education for certificates and things, as well as a link to Bravura Beauties so that people can go and investigate all of those things at their leisure.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'm really excited about the next episode, Kate. So let's go off Beaver and put something together for these beautiful listeners for next
We're going to be
time.
talking about the options with premises and equipment. That's going to be so exciting. That's the
It is
fun
gonna
stuff.
be. Oh, yeah,
Fun stuff.
absolutely. I love drilling down into the nitty gritty. So, yeah, I can't wait. All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.